So the second part of 2.4 starts off with solving these quadratic equations by completing the square. When you are completing the square, you need to make sure that your constant, the term that does not have an x attached to it, is on its own side. From there, you are going to take your b term, so the number in front of x, not x squared, the number in front of x, divide it by 2 and square it. Whatever that number is, you're going to add it to both sides of that equation. You'll factor the left side, add the right side, then take the square root of both sides, and then get x by itself. So what does this all mean? If we look at the first example, we have x squared plus 2x minus 6 is equal to 0, and we're solving this by completing the square. So the first thing that we're going to do is move that 6 over, because that's our constant. So we'll add it to both sides, and that's going to give us x squared plus 2x is equal to 6. Your whole idea here is to find the perfect square trinomial on the left side. So you're going to take b over 2 and square it. So that's the 2 over 2 squared, which is just 1 squared, which is 1. That 1 gets added to both sides of your equation. So that's going to give you x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equal to 6 plus 1. You're going to factor the left side, add the right side. It's easy to factor that left side because whatever you had that was squared simplified, so that 1 to the second power, is what you're going to use. So you're just going to take the variable and add it with that 1. So you're going to have x plus 1 squared is equal to 6 plus 1, which is 7. From here, take the square root of both sides. Remember, when you're taking the square root of both sides, you got to put the plus or minus in front of your answer. So this is going to give you x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 7. You can't do, so you're going to leave it the square root of 7. Now, you just get x by itself. So subtract the 1 over, and that gives you that x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 7. And again, that square root of 7 is going to be last, because that's the part that's irrational. So you always want your rational part first, then your irrational part second. For our next example, we have x squared minus 6x plus 4 is equal to 0. For this one, we're going to move our 4 over, subtracting it from both sides. This is going to give us x squared minus 6x is equal to negative 4. Our b term is that negative 6. So we're going to do b over 2 squared. That's going to give us negative 6 over 2 squared, which is negative 3 squared, and that's 9. That 9 is going to get added to both sides of your equation. So you're going to have x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to negative 4 plus 9. Factor your left side, add your right side. The number that you squared was negative 3, so put an x in there with that negative 3. You're given x minus 3 squared. That is that x squared minus 6x plus 9 factored. It's a perfect square trinomial, so it's going to be a binomial squared factored out. The negative 4 plus 9 is 5. So from here, we'll just take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of the left, take the square root of the right. On the left, that square root cancels out that power of 2. So you just have the x minus 3 left over. And that square root of 5 does not simplify, so it's just plus or minus the square root of 5. Move your 3 over, add it to both sides. And that gives you that x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. For example B, you have 2x squared plus 12x is equal to 8. Every single term here is divisible by 2. So you're going to divide out a 2, or the greatest common factor, from the left side. So that's going to give you 2 times x squared plus 6 is equal to 8. From here, we'll divide that 2 over, and we'll have x squared plus 6x, this is supposed to have an x, is equal to 4. Your constant is on its own side. So from here, find your b over 2 squared. B is that 6. So that 6 you'll plug in to give you 6 over 2 squared, which is positive 3 squared, which is 9. The 9 gets added to both the left and the right side of that equation. So you're going to have x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 4 plus 9. Factor the left side, add your right side. The number that you squared is the 3, so that's going to give you x plus 3 squared is equal to 4 plus 9, which is 13. From here, take the square root of both sides and simplify. The square root of that x plus 3 squared is just x plus 3. The square root of 13 is plus or minus the square root of 13. Move your 3 over, subtract it from both sides to get x by itself, and your answer is x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 13. For example C, we're given x squared plus 8x minus 9 is equal to 0. So with this one, we're going to start it by moving our 9 over. So we'll add it to both sides. That'll give us x squared plus 8x is equal to 9. To find our new C term and what we add to both sides, we're going to take that 8 divided by 2 and square it. So it's going to be 8 over 2, which is 4, squared is 16. We're going to add the 16 to both sides of that equation. So that's going to give us x squared plus 8x plus 16 is equal to 9 plus 16. From here, we're going to factor the left side, add the right side. The number that we squared is that 4, so that's going to give us x plus 4 squared is equal to 9 plus 16 is 25. We're taking the square root of both sides here. The square root of that binomial squared is just x plus 4. The square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. So now, because this one simplified to a number, you're going to separate this into two equations and solve both. So you have a positive 5 as an answer and a negative 5 as an answer. So you're going to do x plus 4 is equal to positive 5, and x plus 4 is equal to negative 5, and solve them both. Move your 4 over, subtract it from both sides. That gives you x is equal to 1. Move your 4 over on the other, subtract it from both sides. That gives you x is equal to negative 9. So you have two solutions here. One that's 1, the other is negative 9. The next part that we're going to look at deals with your quadratic formula. Your quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. You can use this interchangeably when you are solving these quadratic equations. So either you can factor, if you can't factor, you can use this quadratic formula. We have not gone over the square root of a negative number, so if that is the case, you're going to have no solution for that. When we do go over that, it'll change, but for right now, it's going to be no solution if you get the square root of a negative. For example 7 that you see here, you're using the quadratic formula to solve x squared plus 3x is equal to 9. Now, with this one, your terms are not all on the same side, and whenever you use your quadratic formula, they all need to be on the same side. So, first thing with this, move the 9 over. So we're going to subtract it from both sides, and that gives us x squared plus 3x minus 9 is equal to 0. Your a is 1. Your b is the 3. Your c is the negative 9. You're going to plug these three values into your quadratic formula, which is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So you're just plugging in these values and simplifying. So that's going to give you x is equal to the opposite of 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 9 all over 2 times 1. From here, again, you're just simplifying. So the opposite of 3 is negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared is 9. The negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 9 is a positive 36. And this is all over 2 times 1, which is 2. From here, we add underneath that radical. The 9 plus 36 gives us 45. So that's x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 45 all over 2. that 45 can be factored into 5 times 9, and the 9 is 3 times 3. We have 2 3's, so this simplifies to give us x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 3 square root 5 all over 2. You cannot simplify this any further because all 3 of those terms, the negative 3, the 3 square root 5, and the 2, do not share a common factor. So simplified, we have this negative 3 plus or minus 3 square root 5 all over 2. For example A here, again, you're using quadratic formula. This one has all of your terms on the same side. So you're okay to just work this one out. You don't need to move anything around. Identify your A, your B, and your C. A is 3, B is negative 5, C is negative 1. Remember, your quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So you're plugging these values, the a, your b, and your c, into that equation and solving, or into that formula. So that's going to give you x is equal to the opposite of negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 1 all over 2 times 3. So this simplifies to give you positive 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. The negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, times negative 1 is positive 12. And this is all over 2 times 3, which is 6. We're going to add underneath that radical and have 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 all over 6. That square root of 37 does not simplify, so that is your answer. So even with that square root doesn't simplify, but your 5 was, or your 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 was over something like 15, you could not simplify that either. So it has to make sure that you have a common factor between the term that's by itself up top, the term with the radical on the top, and your bottom. They all three have to share a common factor in order for that to simplify. For example B, you have 4x squared plus 12x plus 9 is equal to 0. So again, we're going to have A as 4, B is 12, C is 9. And you're plugging it into that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So that's going to give you x is equal to the opposite of 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 9, all over 2 times 4. So that's negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus the 4 times 36. So that's going to be 36 times 4. The 4 times 6 is 24. The 4 times 3 is 12 plus 2 is 14. So 144 minus 144. And this is all over 2 times 4, which is 8. So that's going to give you x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 8. The square root of 0 is just 0. So that's negative 12 plus or minus 0 over 8. You do not need that plus or minus 0. It's just negative 12 over 8, which then does simplify to give you x is equal, let's do this in a different color, x is equal to negative 6 over 4, which is negative 3 over 2. Our next example, we have x squared plus 2x plus 2 is equal to 0. So all of our terms are on the same side here. We are just going to identify our a, our b, and our c. A is 1, b is 2, c is 2. Again, our quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So that means we are going to have x is equal to the opposite of 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. From here, this simplifies to give us negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 4 times 2 is negative 8 all over 2. This then simplifies to give us x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 over 2. We said before we started this part of this lesson that if we are taking the square root of a negative, which in here we are, it is no solution. You cannot take the square root of a negative yet, so just write no solution for this one. For example D, we have 3x squared minus 4x is equal to 5. For this one, we're going to move our 5 over first, so we're going to subtract it from both sides. We get 3x squared minus 4x minus 5 is equal to 0. From here, we can identify our A, our B, and our C. A is 3, B is negative 4, C is negative 5. Once again, your quadratic formula is the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So this is going to be plugged in, the 3, the negative 4, and the negative 5 gets plugged into all of this, and that's going to give us the opposite of negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 5 all over 2 times 3. So simplifying this, those double negatives turn into a positive 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. The negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, times negative 5 is a positive 60, and this is all over 2 times 3, which is 6. From here, add underneath that radical, you're going to have x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 76 all over 6. That 76 is 2 and 38. The 38 is 2 and 19. Those two 2's pair up, so this simplifies to give you x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2 square root 19 all over 6. Before you say this is my answer, you need to check to see if this is completely simplified. You have 4, 2 square root 19, and 6. They are all divisible by 2, so you'll divide the 4, the 2, and the 6 all by 2. So 4 is going to turn into 2, 2 turns into 1, 6 turns into 3. So this leaves you with x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 19 all over 3. And that is your answer for this one. For these extra practice problems with this section, you're solving by completing the square. For number 1, it gives you x squared plus 14x minus 38 is equal to 0. So the first thing that we're going to do here is move that 38 over. So we are going to add it to both sides. So that's going to give us x squared plus 14x is equal to 38. From here, our b term is that 14, so we're going to find what b over 2 squared is. So we're going to do b over 2 squared, which is going to give us 14 over 2 squared. That's 7 squared, which is 49. That 49 is going to get added to the 38. It's also getting added to the x squared plus 14x. So that gives us x squared plus 14x plus 49 is equal to 38 plus 49. From here, we're going to factor the left side, add the right side. Your number that you squared is that 7, so that left side factors to be x plus 7 squared is equal to 38 plus 49. The 8 plus 9 is 17. We carry that 1. 4 plus 4 is 8. So that's 87. From here, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So take the square root of the left, take the square root of the right. On the left, that square root cancels out your power. It's where you just have x plus 7. On the right, you have the square root of 87. We put the plus or minus in front of that, and we're going to leave it as the square root of 87 because I don't think that simplifies. Yes, it does. Hold on. So that 87 is 3 times 29. Still that doesn't simplify fully, so that's why we're keeping it the square root of 87. So again, that plus or minus is in front of that square root. We move the 7 over now to get x by itself, and that gives us x is equal to -7 plus or minus the square root of 87. And again, we keep that -7 first because that is your rational part. Your irrational part, which is the square root of 87, is what goes last. For example 2, you have x squared plus 6x plus 8 is equal to 0. When we're working with completing the square, that constant has to move over, so we're going to move the 8 over first by subtracting it from both sides. It gives us x squared plus 6x is equal to -8. This should be, your 6 is your b term, so b over 2 would give you 6 over 2 squared, which is 3 squared, and that's 9. So the 9 is what we add to both sides. So that's going to give us x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to -8 plus 9. So now we factor the left side to be x plus 3 squared, since the 3 was in the parentheses that we squared. We add the right side, and that gives us 1. We're going to take the square root of both sides. That square root cancels out the power to give us x plus 3 is equal to, the square root of 1 is 1, so that's plus or minus 1. Since this simplifies to be +1 and -1, those are whole numbers, we can work with them. We're going to separate it to be x plus 3 is equal to 1, and x plus 3 is equal to -1. Then we'll move the 3 over by subtracting it to both sides. So x is equal to -2. Same thing with this one, but we get that x is equal to -4 instead. For example 3, we have x squared minus 4x minus 91 is equal to 7. We're going to start this one by moving that 91 over, so we'll add it to both sides. That gives us x squared minus 4x is equal to 98. From here, we are going to take that -4, plug it into b over 2 squared. That's going to give us -4 over 2 squared, which is -2 squared, and that's 4. We're going to add that 4 to the 98. We're also going to add it to the x squared minus 4x. So that's going to give us x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 98 plus 4. On the left side, if we factor it, it's going to give us x minus 2 squared, because that -2 was in the parentheses that we squared, or was the number that we squared. And then that 98 plus 4 is 102. We are going to take the square root from both sides here. The square root of that binomial square gets rid of your power to where you just have x minus 2. The plus or minus is going to go in front of that square root of 102. It simplifies by dividing by 2 and 51. That 51 is 3 and 17. None of these numbers pair up as 2 of the same number, so we're going to keep it as the square root of 102. From here, we add our 2 over, and that leaves us with x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 102. For number 4, we have x squared minus 12x plus 23 is equal to 0. For this one, we're going to subtract the 23 over first. That's going to give us x squared minus 12x is equal to -23. From here, we take that -12, do b over 2 squared. That's going to give us -12 over 2 squared, which is -6 squared, which is 36. 36 is going to get added to both sides of that equation. So that's going to give us x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to -23 plus 36. From here, we're going to factor the left side to be x minus 6 squared. The right side is going to add. They are different signs, so we're going to subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number. The 6 minus 3 is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. So that's 13. We're going to take the square root of both sides. The square root cancels out the power on that x minus 6 squared, so that's just x minus 6 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 13. Move your 6 over, add it to both sides. We get x is equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of 13. For number 5, we have x squared minus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. We're going to move the 3 over by adding it to both sides first. That's going to give us x squared minus 2x is equal to 3. Our b term is the negative 2, so b over 2 squared is going to be negative 2 over 2 squared, which is negative 1 squared, which is 1. We add this 1 to both sides of our equation. That's going to give us x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 3 plus 1. Your left side factors to be x minus 1 squared, because that minus 1 is what we squared. Then that 3 plus 1 is 4. So if we take the square root of both sides, this is going to leave us with x minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 2. This separates to two equations to give you x minus 1 is equal to 2 and x minus 1 is equal to negative 2. Add your 1 over on both of these, and you get that x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 1. For number 6, you have x squared minus 12x plus 11 is equal to 0. We're going to subtract that 11 over first. That gives us x squared minus 12x is equal to negative 11. Your b is negative 12, so if we do b over 2 squared, that's going to give us negative 12 over 2 squared. That simplifies to be negative 6 squared, which simplifies to be 36. Add that 36 to both sides of the equation. You have x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to negative 11 plus 36. Your left side factors to be x minus 6 squared. Your right side adds to give you 25. Take the square root of both sides. Square root cancels out power, leaving you with x minus 6 is equal to plus or minus 5. Once again, this separates into two equations. One that is x minus 6 is equal to 5. The other that is x minus 6 is equal to negative 5. For both of these, you are going to add the 6 over. So that gives you that x is equal to 11 and x is equal to 1. So your next section of these extra practice problems works with your quadratic formula. If you remember, your quadratic formula from yesterday is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. We're going to use that after we identify our a, b, and c from each of these equations. For number 1, you're given 2x squared minus 3x minus 15 is equal to 0. All of your terms are on the same side, so we can identify a, b, and c. A is 2, b is negative 3, c is negative 15. If we use our quadratic formula, this is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 15 all over 2 times 2. Up top, the double negatives turn into positives, so that's going to give you positive 3 on the outside. Plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared is 9. The negative 4 times 2 is 8, or negative 8. The negative 8 times the negative 15 is going to give you a positive. And then you have 30 times 4 is 120. This is all over 4. So underneath your radical, that simplifies even further to give you 3 plus or minus the square root of 129 all over 4. That 129 is divisible by 3. It goes in 43 times. 43 is a prime number, so we cannot simplify that any further. That is your answer. For number 2, you're given 2x squared plus 9x is equal to negative 7. All of your terms are not on the same side, so you want to move that 7 over first by adding it to both sides. That's going to give you 2x squared plus 9x plus 7 is equal to 0. Your A is 2, B is 9, C is 7. So this is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7 all over 2 times 2. Up top, you are going to have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared is 81. The negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times 7 is a negative 56. And this is all over 4. From here, we subtract underneath that radical. That 1's going to turn into an 11, making that the 8 a 7. So this is going to give you x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 4. That square root of 25 is 5. So you are going to simplify this into two equations. One that is, or two fractions. One that's x is equal to negative 9 plus 5 over 4. The other one that is x is equal to negative 9 minus 5 over 4. If we add that 5 with that negative 9, it gives us negative 4 over 4, which simplifies to be negative 1. If we subtracted the 5 from the negative 9, that would give us negative 14 over 4, which would then simplify to be x is equal to negative 7 over 2. For number 3, you have 5x squared is equal to 80. You don't necessarily need to use quadratic formula for this one, but since our directions tell us to, we're going to. Your 80 is going to have to move over first, so we're going to subtract it from both sides. That's going to give us 5x squared minus 80 is equal to 0. If you identify your A, your B, and your C here, your A is 5. B, there's no x, so that's 0. And C is negative 80. So we plug these values into our quadratic formula. That's going to give us the opposite of 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 80 all over 2 times 5. From here, this is going to simplify to give us x is equal to 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 plus 20 times 80 is 1600. And this is all over 10. So simplifying this even further, we're going to have x is equal to this plus or minus square root of 1600 all over 10. The square root of that 1600 gives you plus or minus 4 zeros, because this is 16 and 100. This is 10 and 10. This is 4 and 4. So your 4s pair up, your 10s pair up. 10 times 4 is 40. And this is all over 10. So you have positive 40 over 10. You have negative 40 over 10. This simplifies to give you 4 and negative 4. For number 4, you have x squared minus 31 minus 2x is equal to negative 6 minus 3x squared minus 2x. Everything that's on the right side here, we're going to move over to be on the left side. So we are moving this 6 over by adding it to both sides. We're going to add it with its like term. Then we are going to add the 3x squared over. Same thing, we'll add it with its like term. Same thing with the 2x, we'll add it over to its like term. These all cancel out on the right side. The 2x and the negative 2x are opposites, so they also cancel on the left side. So you have 4x squared minus 31 plus 6. That 1 turns into 11, making that 3 a 2, so that's negative 25. And this is all equal to 0 now. So your A is 4. Your B, you don't have one, that's 0. Your C is negative 25. So in your quadratic formula, you're going to have the opposite of 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times negative 25 all over 2 times 4. Underneath that radical, you are going to have 0 plus the 4 times 25 gives you 100 times 4 is 400. And that's all over 8. You have plus or minus the square root of 400 over 8, which gives us 20. So that separates to give you x is equal to 20 over 8, and x is equal to negative 20 over 8. 4 is divisible by both the 20 and the 8, so the 20 turns into 5. 8 turns into 2, so x is 5 over 2, and x is negative 5 over 2. For your next example, you're given 9x squared is equal to 4 plus 7x. You got to move that 4 over by subtracting it from each side. Same thing with that 7x. So that's going to give us 9x squared minus 7x minus 4 is equal to 0. A is 9, B is negative 7, C is negative 4. Plugging this into our quadratic formula, we're going to have x is equal to the opposite of negative 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 4 all over 2 times 9. Up top, those double negatives turn into positives. So it's positive 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared is 49. The negative 4 times 9 is a negative 16 times a negative 4 is a positive number. 16 times, or sorry, not 16, 36. 36 times 4 is going to give us, the 4 times 6 is 24. The 4 times 3 is 12 plus 2 is 14, so that's 144. And this is all over 2 times 9, which is 18. So we're going to add underneath that radical, and that's going to give us x is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 4 is 13. Carry the 1. 4 plus 1 is 5 plus 4 is 9. And then that 1 drops down to give you 193. This is all over 18. From here, I don't think there's factors that go into this evenly. So we're going to leave it just like this. For number 6, you have 5x squared plus 9x is equal to 4. We're going to move the 4 over first. We'll subtract it from both sides. That gives us 5x squared plus 9x minus 4 is equal to 0. A is 5, B is 9, C is negative 4. So this is going to give us x is equal to the opposite of 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 4 all over 2 times 5. This is going to simplify to give you negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. The double negatives turn into positives. 20 times 4 is 80. And this is all over 10. So this simplifies even further to give you negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 161 all over 10. Again, I don't think 161 simplifies, so we're going to leave it just like this. That 161 is divisible by 7. So let's see if this works. We have 7 goes into 16 twice with 2 left over. 7 goes into 21 3 times. So it is just 7 and 23. So that's why the 161 stays.